And welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. Today, we're going to talk AI and how AI can help in email automation. To do that, we are going to have our guest, Salma Rench. She is the COO of Rasa.io. And if you're following along at home and want to understand a little bit more and kind of cruise with us while we talk, that's at rasa.io. Really short, really simple. Not rasa.com, but rasa.io, and you'll be able to follow along as we talk through this material. She has been an enrollment manager where she focused on strategic recruitment and marketing. She managed a team of online marketers at the largest digital marketing company in the Gulf South. There, she supported the web development, SEO, online advertising, content marketing teams, and executing strategies which elevated organizations to stand out and be seen amongst the chaos of the online marketplace. Now she is the COO of Rasa.io. She gets to blend her love of digital marketing technology, which we've talked about before, partnership development, customer support, in order to support the incredible community of Rasa.io clients. And she's a female entrepreneur. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about her journey. I know everyone is interested in like, oh my gosh, how did you break the glass ceiling? And how are you there? And how cool. And we chatted briefly about how she manages work and family. So Erica, thank you for taking the time and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. So it's such a techie world, right? Like as soon as you say AI, people always go, that's a male dominated field. And
Sure.
You're like, well, maybe historically, I think it's changing. And here you are as the COO of a company helping with AI and email and such. Talk to me a little bit about your journey. How'd you get here? And then we can jump into what Rasa.io does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the warm intro. Like you said, I started out in strategic recruitment in Tulane's undergraduate admission office. And at that time, there were a lot of wonderful emerging marketing technologies that we were experimenting with in our office that other colleges and universities just weren't touching. And that was so intriguing to me. It was when MailChimp was first becoming a thing. And there were all of a sudden all these tools that allowed you to get in touch with people in a much simpler, more accessible way. And so all of those technologies really intrigued me. It was when SEO was just becoming a thing that you could create a business off of. And so my next logical step after I got my MBA at Tulane was to work at the digital agency that you'd mentioned. And my team executed all of the online things. So SEO, social media marketing, paid online ads, and all of the most popular platforms, front end and back end web dev to optimize for the search engines. But the one thing that we didn't really endeavor to become masters of was email, because email is so hard to do in a quality way and at scale. So when I reconnected with someone that I had met during my business school years, who had created and exited multiple successful tech companies, and he had this idea for Rasa.io that does email really well and leverages AI to do things that scale really well, it really intrigued me. So that's what brought me to Rasa.
I love it. I was taking a just for marketing interest. I was taking some marketing, just online content, kind of refreshing on marketing, and they had a great statistic about email, and they said something like 3 billion people use email, or it was some massive number,
It's
and they said
staggering.
like 70% of sales and such are generated by initial contact or in some way leveraging email. And I was like, I just it just blew my mind. I just paused. I remember it was just a couple of weeks ago, and I stopped and I said, email? Really?
The dinosaur that email is, it's still that effective? Yep.
It was crazy. And then it was increasing. Every stat showed that it was like more and more the medium of choice. So it's very cool. And then to hear the story of how like we get so hung up, I think, on trying to create websites and trying to create all these platforms. And the other thing that it said is if you create the greatest website, but you don't drive any traffic to it,
No one's
does
going
it
to see it.
really matter?
Yeah.
Like,
Does it really matter? Right. If the tree falls and no one hears it or sees it, it
it's,
doesn't matter.
it just kind of caused me to pause because I was like, wow, email. And then as I looked at my guest list for the upcoming week, I was like, I get to talk about email. This is so cool because
Yeah.
here we are. We
Yeah.
get to, and then we blend it with technology. It's so cool.
Right, right. Yeah, we are deep in the depths of the world of email over at Rasa.io, and what we hear time and again from all of the other ESPs that might put out data and studies is that it's not going away, and there's nothing quite like it yet where that's quite as central to people's lives. That has replaced it. So it's still a channel that you want to think very carefully about optimizing, and that's one of our purposes at Rasa.io.
I love it. It's funny because I went through a period where I optimized all my filters, right? I mean, I had like unsubscribed from everything in my personal email.
Sure.
I had optimized all my spam filters, and I was hardly getting any email.
Yeah.
And it was like I thought it would be great, but it was bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was like, I kind of like getting all these notifications. I kind of like scrolling through and it's easy for me to delete. And so then I went through and like resubscribed to stuff that I had unsubscribed from because I missed it, right? I
Right.
wanted email.
You probably missed the good ones, right?
Yeah.
Probably missed
Yeah.
the good newsletters, which is what we try to help people create, are these newsletters that provide value to
Mm-hmm.
audience members and customers and members and subscribers, as opposed to just suck your time.
So now you just said another word, like, when we're talking about like email, the old dinosaur, like newsletter, right? I think
Yeah.
people think of like, some yellowed Xeroxed copy of a piece of paper, that they maybe find in like a physician's office.
Right.
But it's funny you say that because the emails that I do love are the
Mm-hmm.
ones that provide me like articles or they're updating me on something or they're
Right.
newsletters
Right.
essentially.
Yeah.
They might not call it a newsletter, but to me it's a newsletter. And I appreciate those and I quick
Mm-hmm.
read them and then I move on. But it keeps that newsletter and that company kind of top of mind. And so talk to
Exactly.
me
And
about
in
what
your,
you
in your
guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we help folks send a personalized version of their email newsletter to every single one of their subscribers. So if you have
Wow.
10,000 people on your list, instead of sending one email to 10,000 people, you're sending 10,000 different versions based on people's prior reading preferences and behaviors and what we predict they're going to want to read. So it's like the Netflix model, right? You don't have to tell Netflix what you want to watch. Netflix picks up on your behavior, and we do that within an email and figure out what to send you in the future.
It's kind of almost like the Google or Facebook presenting you with the ads, right? I mean, they run
Mm-hmm.
an algorithm that really goes, oh, Michael probably wants to see ads about, I don't know, whatever I want to see, whatever I last
Right.
browsed or whatever, right? It just happens to know what I'm interested in at the moment, which is highly creepy, but very effective because I usually click on it and I'll almost always buy something.
Well, you're exactly right. At its core, it's a recommendation algorithm. We're recommending content just like, for better or worse, the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Twitters know what to recommend to you.
Well, I mean, I think it gets bad hype, but on a good side, I'd rather have it present me with things that I'm interested in than
Mm-hmm.
things that are random.
Right.
There's always that awkward moment when I'm sitting at home on the couch with my wife and my daughter, and I'm watching TV, and up comes the feminine hygiene commercial, and I'm like, where is the button to skip this? How awkward is this? Please get me out of this thing. Right. And then sometimes it'll interact with me and say, do you prefer this ad or that ad? And I'm like, oh, I like this. At least if I got to watch an ad, I want it to be personalized to me and
Right.
something
Right.
that I'm interested in. Right.
Completely. Absolutely. And something that we do to prevent against the complete echo chamber, because like you said, it can be a little creepy, it can be a little scary, is we do ensure a portion of real estate in every email we send is reserved for the not necessarily recommended by our algorithm. And we also, there's another way in which we have guardrails up, and that's if you are the sender of the newsletter, if it's your company's newsletter, organization's newsletter, we work with a lot of nonprofits and associations as well, you can decide from which sources we pull content. And so you can kind of develop what we call this content pool to be of articles, blogs, publications that you feel comfortable with from the beginning.
I like that. I mean, I think, as I have lived in this AI tech world for really since the beginning, which is how old I am, the fear is increasing, right? People are feeling like, oh, this automation's great, but now I've lost control, right? The bots are in control. I don't know how to stop them, and people get images of HAL 2000 and they get, and I'm like, it's really not that bad. It's like the bot isn't going to do anything you don't tell it to do, right? Automation isn't going to do anything you don't tell it to do. So there's work up front to train or program or direct the automation to be helpful. Yeah,
exactly. Very few tools these days are you going to just hand over the keys to the car, so to speak. You, in many cases, if you're working with a tool that uses AI, a marketing tool that uses AI, that's what I know about, it's a blend of the human efforts plus the machine efforts, and that's where the magic happens, is usually somewhere in the middle.
People are, especially when we use AI, right? People that follow the podcast know I get annoyed whenever we say AI because there really isn't artificial intelligence. It's really more like macros or more even natural language processing. Right. It's artificial intelligence, I think, is a cool buzzword that's all encompassing. But I think it also does us a little bit of disfavor because people get like, oh, this is it's going to think on its own. And well, not really. People are intimidated by it. So when we talk about what you guys do, the comments that I hear are, oh, that sounds, overwhelming. Like, I don't know I don't even know where to start. Like, so when somebody says, ooh, automation of newsletters to provide valuable content to my email subscribers, ooh, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
How do they start, and how does the process go?
That's a great question. We have a couple of different agreement types that we have with folks. We work with, like I said, a lot of nonprofits, professional and trade associations, where their newsletters are at the core of the way they communicate with their audiences and how they provide value. So, like, for example, we work with the American Marketing Association. And so in that case, in more of an enterprise level agreement, we work with the organization. We help them identify the content sources that produce relevant content to their members, to their subscribers. We pull them into our system. We help them iterate on that content, filter it down, and get it optimized. We help them with their design, and we can do a complete custom design. We help them with a subscriber integration. So we can do a really fancy arrangement like that. And it's what, like I said, we would call enterprise. But then we also have a self-service model for small to medium-sized businesses who can use the core elements of our technology at a very reasonable price point. All that pricing's online, and so we wanted to make the core of what we do accessible to lots of different sizes of businesses. But if you need that help, and if you need the white glove service and the more boutique email solution, we're that as well.
I love it. I mean, I think, email is here to stay.
Sure.
It's funny when I get newsletters, right? I went to 2 colleges. I have a master's. And so my undergraduate, I still get this really high gloss brochure looking, like, I'm like, whoa, this costs somebody a lot of money.
Don't you feel so bad for the trees too?
Yeah. I'm like, why are you sending this to me? Right.
Same from my
Arizona State. Yeah. Arizona State, go Sun Devils. They do the same thing. They send me, so much stuff, and it's all this really thick, high. And I'm like, you could have sent me an email. Like I
Well, you know
open your
what?
emails,
And
I
she was
read
one of
your
our
emails.
clients too, Michael.
Yeah. Well, somebody needs to smack
We
them
should
around a
tell
little
them that
bit.
they need to
Yeah.
do more newsletters and fewer
And
publications that are print.
well, it's crazy, right? They do. And I'm like, you realize I'm just up the street from you. Like I'm 15 minutes away. Like
You
for
can
the price of
probably
this
pay
thing, you could
someone
have
to come
driven to
talk
my
to you.
house and like told me whatever it is you wanted. It would have been
Right.
cheaper. It was crazy.
Totally.
And I just, I mean, I prefer that email communication way more than I prefer the printed mail communication, right?
I feel the same. Yeah.
Yeah, your mailbox is stuffed with crap and you're like, great, now I filled up my recycle bin. Now I've got to go empty the, like, stop sending me this stuff.
Right. Right.
Um,
I feel so bad about throwing those away, but you can't keep them.
yeah. Yeah. For a while I was, right. And
Yeah.
if you looked in my home office, which nobody ever should, because it's chaos,
I
but
think it
I
looks
have
great. I think it's very organized.
this is my business office
Oh,
podcast studio. So it has to be kept neatly, but my own office. I just have this stack of publications, right, that I feel like I have to keep for some reason. I'll never look at them, right?
right.
If we're being
Right.
honest, I'll never pick them up. But I love the electronic medium because I can search for things. I can digitally file it and pull it up quicker than I could figure out,
Mhm.
the printed material. It just makes so much more sense.
And it's Marie Kondo approved.
Hmm. Yes, it's just so much better for everything, right? For the environment, for consumption, for readability.
Right.
Um, folks when they think about automation of their business, there's that, but I have to be involved, right? Like
Yeah.
it's me. I'm the business owner, especially smaller businesses. They have this like sense of people are buying
The
me. They're not.
ownership. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. How do you balance that when you start doing the automations?
That's a really great question. So the way Rasa.io is set up is such that after we do the onboarding work with folks and we help them figure out, what are the sources that produce valuable content in your space? How do you pull in all of your own content? That's one of the first ways we make sure that the business owners or whoever's managing the instance has control. Is we say anything that you produce, we can make sure that everyone sees it, right? Because if you're going to take the time to put out a journal publication or a blog or an article, you're going to want everyone that's subscribed to your email list to see your stuff, right? So that's one way that we work with folks to say, don't worry about the AI doing things that you don't want it to do, right?
Right.
So, and then the other piece of it is for all the external content that pulls in on a week to week basis, or in some cases day to day basis, the owner of the email process or the newsletter process at the organization will have an opportunity to kind of review everything that'll qualify, but they don't have to spend the time that they normally would putting together a newsletter, because we're going to pull in all the metadata associated with the article, the title, the imagery, the design's already done. So the week to week or day to day maintenance is just a scan and maybe a tweak here and there, as opposed to like the number of hours that it might take to put together an email newsletter. Everyone's stretched for time, right? Everyone has super busy schedules. So the newsletter shouldn't be something that takes that much time, especially if you're already taking the time to publish great content.
It's interesting because I always say, right, like newsletters, emails, things like that. Some of those are relationship continuing items, right? They might not generate a sale per se unless there's, a product offering or you're announcing a new product or something.
Yeah.
But they keep people connected to your business, right?
You're exactly right.
Relationship. And so many times I think people, when they run, especially small to mid-sized businesses that I see, they spend all their time in this feel-good stuff. That's great. You absolutely have to maintain great relationships and continuously add value to your customers so they continue to buy from you and continue to come back and you have retention. But you spend all your time sourcing emails and pitching graphics and stuff. And that's the fun, cool stuff. But that isn't getting you new customers. That isn't growing your business. That isn't developing new offerings and products and services, which is
Mhm.
the growth aspect of your business. And so many times people get stuck over here, right? And they don't automate this stuff. And I'm not trying to say this isn't valuable. Again, it's what maintains or attracts people and it provides value, right? If you're providing value, whether it be through a newsletter or a webinar or whatever you're
Mhm.
doing, people take notice of that and they go, oh, this is really important to me. This is great. I should associate with this business and perhaps buy something from them.
Right.
But they spend all their time over here and then they're not spending time elsewhere. This really, to me, kind of frees them up a little bit, right? It
Yeah.
becomes a set it and forget it kind of thing. And you're
Yeah.
not like, oh, I forgot to send out the newsletter this month or this week or whatever.
Right. But it's so important, like you
It
said, to
is.
stay in people's flow. There's a great book out there called Ninja Sales or Ninja Selling, and it's really geared toward real estate agents, but it's applicable to so many different verticals, like financial advisors or car salesmen or whoever needs to stay in someone's mind, top of mind, in between purchase periods. Because you're not buying a house every day, you're not buying a car every day, you're not meeting with your financial planner every day,
Mm-hmm.
but you want that person still needs to be a presence in your life, so you know that they provide you value, and so you don't forget about them when it does come time for you to need them again.
I love it. Yeah, my this real estate agent who's been following me on LinkedIn for what seems like 2 or 3 years, Sam Levy, if you're listening, how are you? Um, I've never used him, right? But he knows enough about me that he just every once in a while will pop into my LinkedIn direct messages and he'll maintain that relationship, right?
Yep.
Hey,
Sam,
if
you're a
you're
smart guy.
yeah, if you're ever in the need, right? And I said, oh, hey, I am thinking about doing a real estate transaction. Um, love to catch up. And he was like, awesome, right? Like, but
Yeah.
for years, he got nothing out of that. But he used this concept of
Yep.
maintaining that relationship, adding
Mhm.
value, right? Sending me pictures. He knew I liked 4x4ing. So he sent me a picture of this really cool Jeep ride that he went on and sent me all these
Yeah.
cool pictures and stuff. That maintained my interest in him and the business offering that he had. It was really cool.
I wonder if he's read Ninja Selling.
I don't know. I don't know. He's pretty cool. So without giving up the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
But how do you guys go about knowing what I like?
Sure. So every article that comes into Rasa.io system, we use natural language processing to quote unquote read and conceptualize it. And so we know what every piece of content is about. And then we know what our users are opening and clicking on. And then if it is more of an enterprise scale arrangement, we can ingest a bunch of data. We certainly don't have to. And then we also just have data that we've gathered over the course of many, many years of doing this and sending millions and millions and billions of emails. So from all of that, we can match people with the right content.
Do, I mean, it's just right. It's all like hocus pocus behind the curtains kind of stuff. I think for people that aren't familiar with it, but it really all just gets down to data, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's really just like all that data is captured, and then it's essentially reviewed by the algorithm, and the algorithm goes, "Hey, this is what works, and this is what doesn't." It's nothing
Yep,
different than you and I would do if we were to do this process manually and spend hours and
exactly.
hours and
Right,
hours and hours trying to
right,
review all this
right.
data.
Well,
The
it's
more
like
you
that.
send out, the more
The more
data
you
you
send
have.
out, the more data you have, the more you learn. It's that one example. There's a book, The Age of AI, that's Eric Schmidt's book
Hmm.
of Google, and he one of the examples they use. And I'm not like the overall AI expert here by any means. I know a lot about AI marketing, but he gives the example of an antibiotic resistance and how, they needed to find the right antibiotic formula, and they couldn't have possibly tested all of the different formulaic combinations that weren't resistant, or that we weren't resistant against,
Mhm.
without AI. They couldn't find the right formulaic combo without using a machine to test all the iterations. So that's just such an interest. But Could it theoretically have been done by hand? Yeah. But would it have taken so many people so many years? Yeah. But with AI, they did it a lot faster.
Yeah. I always say it's just the computer. Can we all agree that the computer moves faster than we can at most tasks? Everybody's like, well, yeah. I'm like, it's just doing the same stuff we're doing. There's no magic. There's no artificial really anything. It's just following the rules that we give it, and it's
Mhm.
executing a bazillion times faster than we possibly could, poring
And
over
getting
a
better.
room
Yeah.
full of paper and data or staring at, I don't care how many screens you have, you're not moving faster than a computer.
Right.
Um, awesome. So, you know, folks often that are starting businesses or have businesses that are, most people have a website now, and they'll tell me like, "Oh, we have a great website," and I'll be like, "So what?" Right?
Yeah.
To me, a website is 20, 15, 10% of the battle. Like, I don't care what great website you have, unless it's being presented or somebody knows about it or something is driving people to go look for
To
it.
that website. Right.
Meaning, if you're not in the Google, and it's expensive to be like the Google number one search, right? Like
Yeah.
that'll cost
Let's
you
pay to
a
play.
lot.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pay to play. So how does a newsletter fit into like a marketing strategy to get a business, noticed versus just having a website? Because you could be like, well, I'll just put all this new stuff on my website.
Yeah, so if it's what you said earlier, if you're not actually driving that traffic, then what use is it? So a newsletter is a great way to automatically disseminate your own content. If even if you're not really playing the SEO game, which everyone should to an extent, right? You should optimize the content on your website, and there are lots of ways you can Google to figure out how to do that. But you should also somewhat regularly refresh the content on your website because Google likes
Mm-hmm.
that as well. And when you refresh it, you shouldn't only refresh it on your site. You should also share that content with all the subscribers on your list, because if someone has given you their email at some point in the lifespan of your company, that means they're somewhat interested in what you do. So whenever you publish, you should not only share that to social, but you should send it out in an email. And so that's what we make very easy for folks, is the automatic dissemination of that content to their list when they publish on their site, alongside other relevant blogs and articles, because content production is hard and not everyone has the time to do it. So you can lean on rasa.io a bit to share some other relevant industry information alongside your organization's most relevant news and updates.
You said I love talking to kind of like-minded people because I always say
Me too.
don't send an email that it doesn't give them any value, right? Because
Right.
that becomes spammy. But if I send them an email,
Exactly.
I have all these. My marketing department can't stand me because I'm like, hey, create a small PDF attachment that has these stats in it and this links to these articles and stuff. And they're like, why? I'm like, because anytime I send an email to a customer that's asking for them to do something or asking for their time or whatever, I want to give them something in exchange. It's of value, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
keeps me from not getting all the unsubscribe. Like, I'm giving you something of value, and maybe I'm asking you a question. Are you interested in this? Can I help you with that? But I've given them something, and maybe they won't respond, right? But again, they're like, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, here's Michael again. I don't really need Michael, but oh, that's a cool article. And he links to this Gartner article that, wow,
Yeah.
that was really impressive. And I wouldn't have seen that without Michael bringing that to my attention.
Right.
I
You're
do
not
that
just
with,
asking them for stuff every
right,
time you get in contact with them. You're giving them
right.
stuff.
I never email any C-level executive without some attachment of some value that I know about that person, right? Like I emailed a CIO um, in a hospital in Colorado. I know this that he was on a podcast, not mine, but on a different podcast. And I
Yeah.
sent him the link and said, "Hey, Steve, great to see you on this podcast. You
Yeah.
talked about some great stuff, blah, blah, blah." Because he might not have the link. I'm hoping the guest sent him a link to his own podcast episode, but maybe not.
He might not have
he
even had
replied,
the time to listen to it. Yeah.
yeah. And he replied back and said, hey, very cool that you've already found that. Yeah, it was fun, blah, blah, blah. And we had this great conversation through email because I added value. Same thing with sending an email newsletter, right? You're giving
Yeah.
them something of value. And sure, you're going to have this self-promoting aspect to it, but you're also giving them cool content.
And you're becoming the trusted consultant as opposed to like the sales galler guy.
Yeah, I love the emails that add no value, and they're just like, "Hi, could I get 15 minutes of your time to?" No, you can't get no. You'll
Never.
never get 15 minutes of my time. You have no value that you're offering.
Right.
On your website, you guys have this cool little 27-page guide that kind of pops up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
We have a
maybe,
few.
so yeah, so for those folks, it's called Cut Through the Clutter and Confusion of Email Newsletters, 27-page guide, help you leverage the power of email newsletters in your digital marketing strategy. Those that follow the podcast know I love when folks do this and they give something away, right? They're creating a little bit of a sales funnel. You're going to give them your email. They're going to give you a 27-page guide that adds value. It's a fair trade, right?
Yeah.
You get something of value. They get something of value. Everybody's win-win.
Right.
What do they get? What are they going to find out in that 27-page guide?
So they're going to find out about intelligent curation. We're going to make some recommendations about how to marry your own content with external content. Our marketing folks are great, and they're great writers, and they know a lot about. We have a great Rasa newsletter too. I'll go ahead and plug it. but yeah, no, they talk a lot about curation and sourcing content, and then how to intelligently apply that to your email newsletter.
That's so cool. You used a cool term that it got me to go, ooh. You said intelligent curation. I was like, ooh, that's a cool buzzword. I don't know what that means, but that sounds really cool.
Well, and instead of, like you said, instead of spamming folks, sending them content of value and, what sources to consult, where to begin. We often tell a lot of our enterprise clients when they say, I really don't know where to begin with curation and finding the right stuff to send to my clients and members, et cetera. We say, ask them. They're getting it somewhere, right? And they might as well get it from you. So ask them what they're reading, and then use that as inspiration for creating your content pool, as we call it.
I love that so much, right? So many times I have great companies that we consult with that are really close to their employees and really close to their customers. And then I have some that are, struggling in that area. And I always tell them, like, you want to create conversations, right? With your employees. You want to not only communicate to your employees, but you want to listen, right? That two-way communication is like talking to your friend or talking to a spouse, right? It creates healthy communication, and then you guys are more attached to each other than if you just one-way communicate. Well, I don't really have a relationship with you. You're not really interested in hearing from me. And you're much easier for me as a consumer to discard than a company that I've interacted with, maybe through email. And right now I've had a communication with you and I feel much more involved in the process.
Yeah. No, it's one thing to say, I'm firing marketingtechnology.com. It's another thing to say, I'm firing Joe, who I like, who I work with, who I know has helped me. And we've always believed that to succeed and to do well in anything, you need to have a very customer centric approach.
I love it. Pivoting a little bit to kind of your career path, right? Anyone who's a CXO, CEO, CIO, CTO, COO, COO, pick any of those, right? You guys get to be kind of chief bottle washers, get to do everything from soup to nuts. Especially in an emerging industry like AI. That's got to be tough, right? So how do you balance the work life balance? Like I noticed we've been 35 minutes in a podcast. We don't have dogs and kids and stuff all crawling all over the place. Like,
How did I achieve that
yeah,
today?
how did you do that visual magical trick?
So that's a great question. I think number one is I am fortunate to have a supportive partner who has always said, that he wants to help me, achieve my professional dreams. So that's one huge thing, and vice versa. I support him when he has professional things that he needs to do. So that's at a high level. At the more like granular level, I think you have to like live and die by your calendar and organization. And then, I'm fortunate that we found schools that our kids thrive at and that I feel comfortable sending them every day. But I think, yeah, it boils down to a lot around those three things, so much organization. I mean, I look at my calendar a couple weeks out and make sure that things are covered, things are calendared. You have to be organized. I don't know how people do it if they're not organized.
I love it. How about we've had a couple episodes where we've tried to talk about limits, right? Setting limits on technology and not letting technology, because it can, right? We have watches that notify us every time we get a text or an email. We get phones, we get if you're an Apple user, it just like surrounds you, right? It's just everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you find yourself managing those limits to maintain, being present for the family and
not being completely distracted by my phone all the time? I don't necessarily know I'm the poster child for that, but I'll say what I do. I'll say what I do.
I don't think any of us are. Yeah.
So I think the hours between like post, so our kids go to aftercare after their school hours,
Sure.
and I usually can get to them around, the 5 o'clock hour, and then the 5 to 7:30, like those hours are sacred. That is my time to be a present mom. And then after the kids go to bed, that's when I can get back online and close up any loose ends, figure out what needs to be done before, the next day rolls around. So it's really knowing that those precious, 2 to 3 hours are not phone time. Do I check my phone every once and again? Sure. I have, you have to, but knowing that then I can get back on to make sure that everything's done is without, when kids are sleeping, that gives me comfort.
I love it. Yeah. That's a good healthy parameter, I think.
I think so.
Yeah. We had a guest that was like, you have to just set these, like, you have to set all the stuff so your phone doesn't. And I was like, oh, okay, no one's going to do that, right? Like that's just a little extreme.
Right, it's so much time.
Yeah,
I do. There are a couple notifications that I do have, like the push notifications. Mm-hmm. There are a couple apps that I let do that, but I try to turn off most of those.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
As a, anytime you say technology related careers, and then you have a woman who's in a leadership position, people are always like, ooh, how did she do that? Like, I want to do that too. How is it being like in that space, right? It's still pretty much it's evening out. I really want to believe that, but it's still very much a kind of male dominant space, being a leader of a technology company. How is that going?
So to take it a step back, I was the first female employee at Rasa.io. So way back, I guess 4 to 5 years ago, when we first were bringing our newsletter solution to market. I was the first. I mean, we were very startup at that point. Now we have hundreds of clients across lots of different industries, and we, are not a startup, but we're out of that, very stereotypical startup space that you might envision when you think startup. And that I took that very seriously, being the first female employee. I came on as the manager of customer success and marketing. And I wanted to, as a female leader, make sure that I set a precedent for what would be a supportive workplace for future females. Now we have lots of females working at Rasa.io, which I
Very
love.
cool.
But I was a nursing mom. I was nursing my second child at that point, and so we made sure that we had a pumping space for me, and that's
Mhm.
so important. And and everyone was really flexible with me, but making sure to define those parameters early on was something that I took very seriously.
You were kind of trailblazing. I think when we go into these bigger established companies, it's kind of just understood, right? There's just a good accommodation, but being the first female employee, like you almost had a responsibility to
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
especially guys just don't. We're kind of clueless, right? There's a free news flash for everybody. Guys generally are a little clueless, and we're very me centric, right? And we just don't sometimes pay attention, right? And I like to believe that people are generally good, and it's not like we're trying to be some male dominant nonsense. It's
Right.
more just like
But a pumping
you
room
just
just isn't like top of mind. It's just not.
yeah,
It's just
you
not top.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's exactly where my head was. It's not that anyone's trying to make
yeah.
things
I
harder
love
for
it.
me. It's just that I need to assert myself and make
I
sure
love
that
it.
I make things easier for people in the future.
And I think people sometimes, especially in like that new environment, that assertiveness, they're just kind of. I always say like that's a defining factor of a good leader, right? You can be assertive without being an asshole, right? Like you can
Oh,
be,
absolutely.
yeah,
100%.
you
Yep.
can speak up and that's what differentiates you as a leader, male or female, right? Like champion good, right? Be a positive force.
Yeah.
So very cool.
Kindness will win every time. I'm convinced.
Any challenges as a female leader in kind of this AI tech world?
I think, yeah, I think sometimes people are, expecting there to be, someone else that I need to consult, or, someone else who ultimately has the decision making power.
That is
And
so wrong. That's
well,
just so
and of
wrong.
course,
Yeah.
our founder is very Amit Nagarajan, who, like I said, has, created and exited many companies, many tech companies, and he's wonderful. He's not as involved in the day to day, and I consult with him all the time. But I think sometimes people are not
Yeah.
necessarily thinking that I'm going to have final decision making power with certain things, and that that's sometimes harsh, but it's a reality of the world we live in. And I'm working one day at a time to change it.
I had an opportunity to work for just one of the most amazing leaders that I had a chance to work for, who was a female, right? At my last gig, and we'd be in these rooms talking to big companies, like IBM or whatever.
Yeah.
Pick a big tech company, and
Yeah.
it'd be her and I in the room, and they just keep talking to me, right? And I was like,
Sure.
why are they talking to me and not her? Like she's the decision
Yeah.
maker. And finally I just said at one point, I'm like, this is all fantastic, but if you continue to just placate and like pander to me and not pay attention to her, like this is going to go really poorly for you. Like she's the decision maker.
That's so
She's,
interesting.
it was just crazy. And I hadn't really noticed it, until like
Mhm.
I paid attention to it again, right? Guys are just kind of like,
I was
you
going to
know,
say kudos for you for picking up on that. I don't think everyone would.
it was annoying, right? Like she's an amazing person, she's an amazing leader, and taught me so much. But um, just because I felt like just because she was female, right? They just
Yeah.
weren't directly addressing her, and I was like, wow, this is awkward, uncomfortable, and wrong, right? All at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Yep. That those things still happen. Hopefully less, but they definitely still happen.
I hope less. I hope a lot less.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. When you mentioned pricing's out on the website, for those of you listening and following along at home, there's literally a tab that says pricing. For those of you that are a small business, we're not talking, I challenge all the people that listen that they get so intimidated by all this technology, and they're like, I can't. The assumption is as soon as you say AI, they're like, I can't afford that. And it's like,
Mhm.
calm down, relax,
Yeah,
everybody. Everybody
right.
just sit
Wait, wait.
down for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we're not talking, IBM Watson here. We're talking email automation and newsletters and more importantly, like the product to me is relationships. I mean, you guys are really creating a product around relationships, and we're talking.
Content relationship automation is
It's
a term that we've coined.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it really is. It's so very cool, and it's very consumable. Less than $50 a month if you're a small business, and then you guys obviously partner with the larger ones. But you have some large clients. It sounds like, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We work with American Marketing Association. We work with American Bankers Association. There is an organization called American Society of Association Executives. They were one of our early adopters, and they touch um, thousands and thousands of nonprofits all around the world.
Wow.
We work with tons of marketing agencies. We work with Fidelity Bank. We work with lots of small influencer types all the way to enterprise scale organizations. So we're very fortunate. We have a great client list, and we work with some really great people.
I love it. Well, you guys have a great website out there too. I encourage everybody again to go out and check it out. There's lots of videos. There's lots of cool testimonials. You can see businesses very, very large to, obviously businesses very, very small with testimonials of how they're using the product. You can get the free 27-page download, which is also very cool. So
Mm-hmm.
lots of information. I'm sure they can reach out through there and get contact and such. They
Yeah,
can
and feel
probably
free to connect with me on LinkedIn too, Erica Salm
awesome.
Rench, like the tool without the W.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your personal journey and
Thank
story,
you.
which is powerful, and then how AI is helping create relationships. That also is very powerful.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for having me. This has been great. You're a great
Awesome.
host.
Thank you.